In a Nuzlocke, a Pokemon that faints is boxed forever, and while there's a long list of additional rules I'll be following, today I'm only going to be using bug types. In real life, bugs can be some of the most terrifying creatures on the planet, but in Pokemon they're sort of known as the weakest type. And since there's a grand total of 0 Insectoid starter Pokemon in any of the games, picking Snivy won't have an effect on our team, but at least it gives Hugh a fire type for that extra bit of challenge. Instead, we can find the first available bug Pokemon on Route 2, and it's Sewaddle. And not only is a Bug's Life here the cutest little guy ever, he's also somehow stronger than Onix. Man, poor Onix just can't catch a break. Since there aren't any other bug Pokemon before the first gym, I made sure to level up exclusively against Patrat to get to the level cap to get me as many attack EVs as possible because we're gonna need them. As we start the fight with Charen, it's probably a good time to mention that I decided to play this on challenge mode since it's my favorite way to play Black and White too, but it does mean that he has 3 Pokemon and an additional flying type on his team. His first Pokemon is Patrat, so I hit it with my strongest move, Bug Bite, which does a little bit less than half. My next Bug Bite gets a critical hit, which is fantastic since that means we only had to take 1 hit from this Patrat. It also means I reached level 15 for an extra stat boost, which is fine since I only have to start the battle at the level cap. Charen's second Pokemon is Lillipup, which outspeeds me and hits me with a tackle as I go for a Bug Bite, which is crucial since I not only remove Lillipup's Oranberry, but can restore 10 health to Bug's Life, almost getting back to full. After taking another tackle, I go for a Bug Bite, taking Lillipup down into the red, which activates Charen's potion. This gives me a free opportunity to use another Bug Bite, taking the Lillipup down into the yellow as it then hits me with a tackle, which activates my own Oranberry, taking me back over half as I can take out the Lillipup with yet another Bug Bite. This only leaves Charen's final Pokemon Pidove, and since neither Bug Bite or our newly acquired Razor Leaf are effective against flying types, we have to resort to using Tackle. After taking a Tackle, the Pidove goes for a workup and hits us with a quick attack to below half as I go for another Tackle. I then once again get a critical hit to finish off the fight, but if that Pidove would have just used more quick attacks, we probably would have been toast. Moving on, before we get to Verbank City, we can run into our next encounter of Venipede. Now, I am aware that this is also Route 20 where we caught Sewaddle, but since they have completely different encounter tables and this is the only way we can get Venipede, and in fact the only way we can proceed with the run, I am gonna allow it in this instance. I name my little centipede human for obvious reasons, and while the swarm ability is okay, for now we proceed to Verbank City. As soon as you enter Verbank, you meet Roxy, and I'm a big fan, but to my knowledge, she's the only famous musician we know of in the Pokemon world, and I feel like that's unfair to some of the other great bands like Team Rocket, and who can forget bands like Lance and the Elites who dominated the 80s with their hit single, Born to Be a Sinner. I was born to be a sinner. Born to be degenerate. Or of course my personal favorite, B-Rock with the power ballad No Joy. And girl, you're the one that brings me back to the center, 'cause I got no joy. However, for now, I think we'll have to focus on Roxy, who does happen to be our next gym opponent. And in challenge mode, she's got 3 Pokemon, starting off with a Coughing, so I send in Venipede since Sewaddle's weak to poison, and I immediately opt to go for Defense Curl, which doesn't just boost my defense here, it also powers up Rollout. I then get hit by a Venoshock, but it being not very effective, it doesn't do that much damage as I go for my first Rollout, which does about 1/6 of damage as I get hit by another Venoshock. The second hit of Rollout takes the Coughing down below half, so it heals up again with an Oranberry, hitting me with a Venoshock, activating my Oranberry, after which the third Rollout is enough to take out the Coughing. Roxy then sends in her ace Pokemon Whirlipede, but since Rollout is now at 4, 1 is definitely enough to take out the Whirlipede. Finally, we gotta deal with Grimer, and I don't miss my Rollout, and the 5th Rollout is definitely gonna be enough to take it out, meaning that we claim the 2nd gym badge. Do you guys think they have horror movies in the Pokemon world? Like, what if there was a Ditto that just transformed into people and framed them for crazy crimes, and they called it The Imposter? Yep, it's okay. I'll see myself out. Moving on to Castelia City, while taking on the trainers down in the sewers, Venipede got to level 22, evolving it into a Whirlipede. I pick up some sewer leftovers and make sure to get Sewaddle a massage. I then evolve it into a Swadloon, and since I've managed to get it to max friendship, I can even get it to evolve into Leavanny. Next up is Berg, and this guy is the real imposter for thinking that he's the best bug trainer in Unova, when in fact, that is I. He also claims he's the better artist, and I took that personally. He leads with Dwebble, which could cause huge problem with Rock Blast, so I use Bug Bite right away to eat up its Citrus Berry as it goes for Rock Polish to boost its speed. I then use another Bug Bite, which is enough to take it out, which means we now have to take on Carablast. I was hoping a max friendship return would be enough to take this thing out, but it leaves it in the red and it uses a quad effective Aerial Ace, which we at least survive. Now expecting Berg to go for a Hyper Potion, poison, it's the perfect opportunity to swap out into Whirlipede. Not only does this Karrablast have Aerial Ace, the one I'm really worried about is the fact that his Leavanny does, which could do some massive damage. So I had to resort to desperation, and I start by using an Iron Defense just to make sure that we don't take too much damage from these Aerial Aces. The next turn, I set up another Iron Defense, and it certainly helps to have that Leftovers recovery since we're going to need every hit point we can get. I then attempt to go for a rollout, but of course I miss. However, with +4 defense up, these Aerial Aces aren't really making a dent in our health bar, so I can just start using rollout. In fact, on the second turn of rollout, it's even enough to take out the Karrablast. This means we now have to take on Leavanny, but because we're at +4 defense, we can of course tank an Aerial Ace. Whirlipede then hits it with a third rollout, and it does a little bit over half, activating the Leavanny's Citrus Berry, after which it strikes us with an Aerial Ace for about 10% of our health, and we take it out with the fourth rollout. This only leaves Shelmet on Berg's challenge mode team, and I'm not exactly worried about it since of course a fifth rollout is going to just one-shot it, giving us the third gym badge. And getting this far in the game, we get access to our third bug type of the run, our very own Dwebble. I name it after the critically acclaimed motion picture The Ant Bully, and with an impish nature, which is the best possible nature it could have, and the sturdy ability, I am very happy with this thing. Then just past Nimbasa City, we can either get a 10% Combi or 5% Heracross, and with my luck, that is without a doubt going to be a male Combi. On the way, I encounter another Venipede, but because of Dupe's Claws, we can't catch another Pokemon of the same species, after which I find a female Combi. I was honestly dreading how many encounters in this game we wouldn't be able to evolve, but since Combi was female, it's a very welcome addition to the team. I name her B-Movie.
You like jazz?
Because of the level cap being 32, Human can evolve into its final form, Scolipede. And since it evolves into Vespiquen at level 24, we can also evolve B-Movie, which means it's time to take on the fourth gym leader, Elisa, and her electric types, and the fact that she has both flying moves and fire type moves on her team, it's pretty concerning. I lead off with Scolipede, who can outspeed and hit the Emolga with a Poison Tail, which actually gets a critical hit, taking it down into the red. After getting healed up by its Citrus Berry, I was expecting it to go for an Aerial Ace, but it just goes for Pursuit, I guess expecting me to swap out. So I just hit it with another Poison Tail, and I'm very happy to have Emolga out of the way. And even with Substrika, Elisa is completely committed to using Pursuit here for whatever reason, so I hit the Substrika with a Poison Tail, and I do manage to get the poison. I then get stomped, and hoping to not get flinched, I do manage to use an Iron Defense, boosting my defense to +2. After that, the poison does take Substrika into a range where it heals up with its Citrus Berry. And here, even though Volt Switch would do way more damage because of our Iron Defense, it still goes for Pursuit as I hit it with an Iron Tail. And if anybody knows why Elisa's doing this, I would very much like to know, but of course we managed to get Substrika down into a range where she heals up with a Hyper Potion, and after getting hit by a couple more Poison Tails, the Substrika now goes for the Volt Switch. This ends up activating Human's Oranberry, which is just the best item I had on hand as Substrika swaps out for Flappy. Since Human's slower, this means the Bug Bite hits Flappy instead, taking it down to about 55% as I then hit it with a Poison Tail, getting it poisoned and down into the red. It uses Thunder Wave to paralyze Human, and I was really hoping that Poison would take this thing out right here, but it leaves it on a sliver. Since a Volt Switch would most likely take out Scolipede here, I decide to swap out into Ant Bully, who gets hit by the Volt Switch instead. It takes me down below half, and once again an Oranberry edges me over as she swaps out into Joltik. Fortunately though, the Ant Bully is faster, even though it looks like it would be really slow, and can take out the Joltik in a single Rock Slide. The Zebstrika then hits me with a Pursuit, getting a critical hit as I retaliate with a Rock Slide, getting it down into the red, but the poison is enough to take it out. Finally, we've got Flappy, who's left on basically no health and is poisoned, so I take the turn to swap out into Bug's Life, expecting the Volt Switch, which I do get hit by, but of course she can't swap out to a different Pokemon, and after getting Leftovers recovery, the Flappy goes down to its poison, which means we get the fourth gym badge. Moving on to Driftvale City, we can find ourselves another encounter just past it on Route 6. Unfortunately, these encounters could either be Karrablast or Shelmet, neither of which are able to evolve in this run. I name my Karrablast the Fly, and it's pretty much going to be death fodder at best and useless at worst. I then make sure to get my Pokemon up to the level cap, and since Dwebble evolves at level 34, it evolves into Crustle. And with preparations out of the way, it's time to take on Clay and his ground types, who have a lot of rock moves in their movesets. He starts the fight with Crocorock, so I decide to send in Ant Bully, mostly just to eat the Intimidate so I can instantly swap into something else. The only reason this is safe is because Crocorock is the only Pokemon on Clay's team that doesn't have Rock Slide. On the switch, Bug's Life gets hit by a Torment, which means it can't use the same move twice in a row, after which I take out the Crocorock with a single Bug Bite. Next is Onix, who hilariously does get to face off against Sawaddle, except in its final form. A quad-effective Leaf Blade takes it down to its Sturdy, as it goes for Rock Polish much doubling its speed. Expecting Clay to go for a Hyper Potion here, I decide to go for Return instead of a super effective move to not bring it down into Sturdy. The Onix then outspeeds with a Rock Slide, which doesn't flinch me, which means I can take it out with another Leaf Blade. Third is Sand Slash, but since I'm under Torment, I go for Protect in between turns just so that I can use Leaf Blade the next turn, which is also enough to take out the Sand Slash in a single hit. Finally, we have to deal with Excadrill, and since it's holding a Citrus Berry, I decide to use Bug Bite right away, which doesn't do that much damage, but at least it heals us up to full health, after which we have to tank a Bulldoze, which lowers our speed. Because of the speed drop, Excadrill outspeeds the next turn, hitting us very hard with a Rock Slide, but I don't flinch and I can retaliate with a Leaf Blade, which takes it down low into the yellow. Normally it would be smart to switch out here, but since I have Protect and Leftovers, I can get just enough health back to where I can survive another Rock Slide, but it just goes for Slash instead, so I can go for Leaf Blade, taking it out, winning us the fight. I was definitely risking a crit there, but even by switching, that's not something I could get away from, so I feel like it's justified. Clay, what exactly is your badge supposed to look like? Once beating the gym, we get access to the Pokemon World Tournament, but not just that, we also get access to the Relic Passage, so after stocking up on Ultra Balls, I make my way through the passage to the Relic Castle, where in Black and White 2, you can find a level 35 Volcarona, which normally evolves at level 59. It being a dual fire type is a pretty awesome pickup, and I name it Pacific Rim because that movie sort of has flying kaiju bugs. The impish nature isn't exactly ideal, but I guess it pairs okay with Flame Body. On to Mistralton, we have to pass through Chargestone Cave, where we can find another little bug, Joltik. I name her Charlotte's Web, and with the Compound Eyes ability, we're hopefully going to be able to drop some fat thunders later on. I immediately evolve it into Galvantula, which is going to come in handy right away, versus the next gym leader, Skyla, and her flying types, which is a terrible matchup for bugs. She sends in Swoobat as I let Galvantula take the lead. And I made sure to EV train Charlotte in both special attack and speed to be able to outspeed and one-shot the Swoobat. Volt Switch then lets me switch Pokemon, so I send in Ant Bully, which is going to bait out Swanna. This is obviously a pretty bad matchup since the Surf is going to do massive damage, but since I have Sturdy, I'm not even afraid of a critical hit, and it leaves me on 28 HP as I can then go for a Shell Smash, boosting my attack and speed. This is going to be enough to both outspeed and take out the Swanna, albeit with the chance to miss. The same goes for her next Pokemon, Sigilyph, but the Ant Bully doesn't mess it up, taking out the Sigilyph with a single Rock Slide. The same can't be said for Skarmory, which resists Rock Slide, has great defense, and the Sturdy ability, so I swap out into Pacific Rim, expecting a Steel Wing. The Skarmory just ends up missing the Steel Wing as I then go for a Fire Spin the next turn, which does a bit below half, and believe it or not, Fire Spin is the best fire move I can have at this point. After setting up with Agility, it heals up with a Citrus Berry from the Fire Spin damage, and then goes for Aerial Ace, getting a critical hit on Pacific Rim, which survives it on 1 HP. Honestly, it would have probably killed the run to lose Volcarona here, so I'm very happy she survived. Then after missing my Fire Spin, I have to swap out into Charlotte, who tanks an Aerial Ace above half health. After it fortunately does not get a critical hit, I can use my most powerful electric type move, Volt Switch, to take it out, sealing the deal, getting us the 6th gym badge. You guys know we're just flying towards a JPEG, right? Okay, I'll sit quietly. Once in Lentimus Town, we can capture ourselves a Scrappy, but since Drapion is a dark poison type, we're not going to be evolving it. However, on Route 12, we can find a Heracross, which is an excellent addition to the team. I end up just using my Master Ball here since there are a few more encounters we can get, but this is by far the most meaningful. We don't end up getting the Guts ability, but you can't have it all. It's then time to take on the Dragon-type Master and Gym Leader of Opelucid City, Drayden. I decide to start out with the Ant Bully and set up a Shell Smash right away to get our stats boosted. Since I have Sturdy, I'm not afraid of what this Druddigon is going to do to me, but it just goes for Revenge, which barely does any damage at all, even at -2. I figure it's too risky to go for another Shell Smash to get to -4, but a +2 X-Scissor isn't actually enough to take it out, and because we hit it, Revenge does a lot more damage this time. Another X-Scissor is of course enough to take it out, and Flygon gets the same vicious treatment. Altaria resists the X-Scissor, but a Stab Rock Slide is even better, which means we only have to deal with this Ace Haxorus. Since I know the Haxorus has a Citrus Berry, I go for a Bug Bite, which does pretty decent damage, and the Citrus Berry heals me up above half, which makes me confident I can take another hit, but it just goes for Dragon Dance. This is ultimately the Haxorus's undoing since I'm at +2 speed and able to outspeed the next turn, taking it out with an X-Scissor. Whoa, seriously, your Pokemon can't use Surf at all. You can't ride the real wave or feel the vibe, dude. It's not my fault I can't get a one. That's just rude. Speaking of guys who are definitely vibing and riding waves, we next have to face Marlin with his water types. The only real thing I'm worried about on this guy's team is his shell-smashing Caracosta. His first Pokemon, Wailord, which, by the way, is somehow less dense than air and should be flying, gets immediately obliterated by a discharge, which means he sends in his Caracosta. Predicting a Rock Slide, I pivot out into Ant Bully here, who's guaranteed to survive it because of Sturdy. I do this to bait out a Scald, which gives me a free switch into Bug's Life, who can tank it very well. It also fortunately doesn't get the 30% burn, which means I can freely hit in a Leaf Blade here, taking Caracosta down to its Sturdy, having it heal up with Citrus Berry as it then goes for the Shell Smash. The real strategy here though is that I EV trained Bug's Life in speed to be able to outspeed Caracosta, who's pretty slow anyway, even after a Shell Smash, so I can take it out with a Leaf Blade. Expecting the quad effective Air Slash from Mantine, I swap out into Charlotte, who can very swiftly take it out with a quad effective Discharge the next turn. Finally, there's Jellicent, but since I'm unsure if I can take a Shadow Ball or Scald, I go for a Volt Switch here, which does about half as it heals up with a Citrus Berry, allowing me to swap out into B-Movie. The Shadow Ball ends up doing quite a bit of damage as I then get hit by a Scald, which even gets the burn. This is mostly fine since I pretty much just sent in B-Movie to use Toxic. However, since I'm at such low health, I go ahead and send in Human, who's still at full health, that ends up taking a Shadow Ball at just above half. Not wanting to risk a high roll and realizing I don't really have a move to hit the Jellicent with Human, I go ahead and swap out into Bug's Life, and since the poison has taken its toll, the Jellicent is now at a point where a Leaf Blade takes it out, granting us the final gym badge. To proceed with the story, we have to go to Seaside Cave, where we can actually get our next encounter, Shuckle. And while we're on that topic, why is Shuckle a Bug-type Pokemon? Isn't it more of like a turtle thing? I don't know, you let me know. At this point, we've reached the Plasma Gauntlet, and the first opponent we have to face is Colress, who is usually a very difficult opponent. I've lost a lot of Pokemon to this guy over the past year, and I'd like to try and avoid that if possible. I start out with a quad-effective Bulldoze against Magneton, but since it's holding an Eviolite, it actually doesn't do as much damage as you'd think. It then paralyzes me with Thunder Wave as Colress is prompted to go for a Full Restore as I hit another Bulldoze, which this time gets a critical hit, hitting the Magneton down to its Sturdy. He follows that up by hitting me with a Volt Switch, ironically swapping out into his Magnezone since I was about to hit it with a Bulldoze, but unfortunately I get fully paralyzed. Expecting it to go for an electric type move, I swap out into Charlotte here, but it oddly goes for Flash Cannon, which still does a fair amount of damage as I go for Electro Web, trying to lower the Magnezone's speed and breaking its Sturdy. This unfortunately leads to Charlotte getting paralyzed by Thunder Wave, but figuring I can take another hit, I decide to stay in as the Magnezone hits me with a Discharge, taking me down to 1 HP with a critical hit. That's the second crit we've survived on 1 HP this run, which is absolutely nuts, but here I go for the Volt Switch, swapping out into Ant Bully. Figuring that it's going to go for the super effective Flash Cannon, I decide to go for a Shell Smash here since I do have my Sturdy intact since I'm at full HP, but it just ends up going for Thunder Wave. And since we still have Sturdy the next turn, I decide to click Bulldoze, but I end up getting a quick Claw proc, meaning that we still have Sturdy even after 2 turns. Metang comes in next, and it does break our Sturdy with a Meteor Mash that also gets a critical hit. This time, it's not as much of a mystery why it leaves us at 1 HP, but a Bulldoze here is enough to take out the Metang. Next, Colress sends back in Magneton, and since we're expecting a Flash Cannon to take us out here, I go ahead and swap out into Pacific Rim, who can tank it very well. To deal with the Magneton's final HP, I go for Silver Wind instead of Fire Spin here since it doesn't matter, but we could have gotten the Omni Boost if we were lucky, but sadly that doesn't happen. Fling Clang being able to boost both its attack and speed with Shift Gear could potentially be a threat, so I decide to go for Will-O-Wisp. This is going to nerf its attack, which at least might give us a few turns to try and take it out as it tries to set its attack back up. My strongest fire-type move is still Fire Spin, which is pretty underwhelming, but with both the residual damage of Burn and Fire Spin, it's actually doing quite a bit of damage. Then in a desperate attempt to do some damage, Kling Clang goes for a Giga Impact as it stares Doom in the face when I take it out with a Fire Spin. Chorus's final Pokemon is a Beheeyem, but since we already have a powerful Bug-type Pokemon in, we can outspeed and take it out with a single Silver Wind, sealing us the victory. How is it possible for anyone to know where they're supposed to steer this ship when there's a flight of stairs right in front of the steering wheel? The next obstacle on our way is Kirum Black, a formidable opponent truly. And while this thing is super strong, the hardest part about this fight is that you face Getsis right afterwards without a break. My plan to take this thing out was pretty simple: survive any move with Sturdy and then take it out with Rock Wrecker, but we end up getting a Quick Claw proc, so I don't even take any damage, which is perfect. This leads us to the final Team Plasma boss battle versus Big Bad Ghetsis himself. His first Pokemon is a pretty annoying Cofagrigus that knows Toxic, which we definitely want to try and avoid, so as I send in Antbully, who I had to have in from the previous fight, I go ahead and swap into Human as I predict the Toxic. Figuring I can take one Psychic since Cofagrigus isn't that powerful, I decide to set up an Agility and follow that up by a Baton Pass. This means I can pass +2 speed to Bug's Life without risking getting Toxic on the switch, since it's never going to go for Toxic against a Poison type. I was expecting it to Toxic here, but it just goes for Protect as I set up my first Swords Dance. The next turn, it's most definitely gonna go for Toxic, which I am gonna allow to happen as I just go for a Swords Dance. In hindsight, I should have ran around Unova and tried to find a Pecha Berry here because Poison is gonna take its toll, but at least I get to +6 attack here as the Cofagrigus goes for Protect. It then sneakily tries to get in the double Protect to get as much poison damage as possible, which it doesn't get as I can take it out with a +6 Leaf Blade, giving me the Mummy ability. Next up is Electros, and since we're at +6, this thing is gonna get absolutely destroyed too, but now we're sort of faced with a problem, and it's the fact that we're not gonna be able to sweep through Ghetsis' team. Because even though the KO against this Seismitoad is about as free as they come, we're about to run out of health. We could in theory take out Ghetsis' 4th Pokemon as well, but that would lead to us sacrificing a Bug's Life, and I'm not really ready to part with my starter, at least not on my own terms. So expecting either a Cross Poison or an X-Scissor here, I go ahead and swap into Human, who tanks an X-Scissor very well. Logically, I then expected the Drapion to go for an Earthquake here, but it isn't actually super effective, so it is going to go for the more powerful Night Slash instead. Since B-Movie can tank another one, even if it crits, I decide to go for an Air Slash, but it does fairly underwhelming damage, so I go ahead and swap out into Antbully. On the switch, I get hit by another Night Slash, but because of Antbully's ample defense, it doesn't do that much damage, and after taking another one, I decide to set up a Shell Smash. I then decide to get a little bit greedy, going for another Shell Smash, but because Crystal's defense is so good, I figure I'm going to be able to take a hit, and in fact, I do. I can now simply outspeed with a super effective Bulldoze, taking out the Drapion, which is going to bait out the Hydreigon since it does have Rock Slide in its moveset, and so I can just swiftly outspeed it, take it out with an X-Scissor. Faced with Ghetsis' final Pokemon, I really don't want to get hit by a Sucker Punch at +4 because it's probably going to take out Crustle, so I go ahead and swap in Pacific Rim safely. I then go for the most powerful move I can hit it with, which is unfortunately Fire Spin, as a Poison Jab doesn't do too much damage. Figuring I might be able to do more damage with Fly, it actually doubles up as a pretty good stalling tactic for Fire Spin. The Fly actually does end up doing a lot of damage, not quite taking out the Toxicroak as it hits me with a Poison Jab, which does get the poison, but ironically it activates my Flame Body, which is going to be enough to take out the Toxicroak with the burn. A pretty hilarious ending to the fight that I'm very happy with nonetheless, since we didn't lose a single Pokemon. And with that victory out of the way, we have to make our way towards Victory Road. But first, I can finally pick up a better Fire-type move for Volcarona and make my way to the Pokemon League. After careful consideration, these are the team members I'll be bringing to the Elite Four. With X-Scissor, Swords Dance, Shadow Claw, and Leaf Blade, a Bug's Life is a critical hit machine. Human is mostly there to fill the role of support with Toxic, Baton Pass, Agility, and Megahorn. The Antbully is going strong with X-Scissor, Rock Slide, Shell Smash, and Stealth Rock for some niche purposes. We then have Pacific Rim with Psychic, Flamethrower, Silver Wind, and the newly learned Quiver Dance. Charlotte's rocking Thunderbolt, Bug Buzz, Volt Switch, and Discharge. And finally, I decided to replace B-Movie right at the end, which means we have Heracross with Close Combat, Shadow Claw, Megahorn, and Night Slash. And so it begins. I take those steps you can't take back and enter the Elite Four, the first of whom we're going to challenge being Chantal. She always starts out with an incredibly annoying Cofagrigus that likes to burn you with Will-O-Wisp, but I realize that I have a fire type that can't be burned in Pacific Rim that's also equipped with Quiver Dance, which not only is going to minimize the already pretty pathetic special damage Cofagrigus can do, but it's going to boost our special attack and speed. And towards the end of my setup, I was even getting more leftovers recovery back than it was doing damage to me. And it's very safe to say that what follows is a bloodbath. I'm not sure if there's anything in this game that can take a neutral hit at +6 from Volcarona. Regardless, our matchup versus Marshall later on is so bad that I will certainly take a sweet victory like this. In fear of Marshall, I decide to tackle Grimsley next. Being a Dark-type specialist, I have a pretty good matchup against this guy with my Bug types. His first Pokemon is Lypard as I send in Charlotte. As expected, he immediately goes for a normal gem Fake Out, which actually does a fair amount of damage, which obviously flinches me. He then very thankfully does not get a critical hit with his Night Slash as I go for a Bug Buzz, which is gonna take out the Lypard. Then next out is Scrappy, and since I definitely can't take this thing out in one hit, I decide to go for Volt Switch, which is boosted by my Electric Gem and ends up doing quite a lot of damage. I switch into Heracross, who gets immediately hit by a Rock Tomb and has its speed lowered. This is enough for Scrappy to outspeed me the next turn and hit me with a Poison Jab, which doesn't do that much damage as I can then take it out with a close combat. Next up is Bisharp, and even though fighting is quad effective here, I do have my speed lowered, so I decide to swap out into the Ant Bully, who can tank the Aerial Ace. I used Ant Bully as a pivot since it's now going to go for Metal Claw, which means I can safely switch in Pacific Rim. This lets me take out the Bisharp with a Flamethrower the next turn pretty much for free. Crocodile is next, and I made a very embarrassing mistake here. I accidentally left Pacific Rim at level 100 in my calculations, which means that this Silver Wind would have taken it out. But it actually doesn't at level 63, but the Crocodile misses its Rock Tomb, which would have definitely taken me out. I'm not really sure if I deserve to not be punished there because that was definitely a stupid mistake. Then right afterwards, regardless, I would have gotten 2 hits in a row here, so it wouldn't have mattered, but I get a critical hit to speed things up. Finally, we have to deal with Absol, but because it's so slow and has pitiful special defense, we can take it out with a single Silver Wind, winning us the fight. Since we did not lose Volcarona in that near-death experience, I realize how lucky I am to have it in my life, and I'm gonna abuse it to the fullest extent facing Caitlyn. Immediately versus Musharna, I expect this thing to go for a Hypnosis, but since I can boost my special defense with Quiver Dance, and Volcarona has pretty decent special bulk as it is, I decide to set up and let it put me to sleep as I have a Chesto Berry and then go for a Silver Wind, which isn't quite enough to take it out, but it gives me the Omni Boost. Unfortunately, this does mean that Musharna is going to go for Hypnosis again, putting me to sleep, but at +2 special defense, I'm feeling much safer, and despite that, Caitlyn goes for a full restore, wasting a turn of my sleep. The turn right after, I end up waking up going for a Quiver Dance as the Musharna tries to eat my dreams, which is impossible since I ain't dreaming. And Caitlyn won't be dreaming either after this absolute nightmare I'm about to cause. In fact, the entire rest of her team gets one-shot by either Flamethrower or Silver Wind, which means it's time to take on my worst Elite Four matchup versus Marshall. Now, you may be thinking to yourself that fighting types are resisted by bug types. The problem is really that he has rock type moves for coverage on most if not all of his Pokemon. I start the fight by going for a Flying Gem Aerial Ace, which does above half to this throw as it then goes for Bulldoze, lowering my speed. At this stage, another Aerial Ace won't take it out, so I go for a close combat, which isn't ideal since it lowers my defenses, but at least it takes out the throw. Against Mienshao, I decide to swap out into Pacific Rim as it goes for a Bounce. Since I outspeed, I decide to go for a Quiver Dance here to boost my stats since I would have just wasted my move anyway, and the Bounce then hits me and fortunately does not get the paralysis. The next turn, I hit it with a Psychic, and I do have a Psychic Gem boosting its power here, but it's completely unnecessary, one-shotting the Mienshao. Next is Conkelder, since it does have a Rock-type move, which it's going to try to hit us with, but we outspeed and take it out with a single +1 Psychic. The Sock does have Sturdy, so no matter what, it could get a Rock Tomb off on us, so I have to swap out into my Fighting-type Heracross to be able to tank it at all. Since I'd taken just a little bit of damage, I'm expecting to be able to take a second Rock Slide, and I just barely do on 16 HP, being able to take out the Sock with a second Aerial Ace. And with just a few clutch EVs and speed, we're able to outspeed and take out the Lucario with a close combat, which means that we've gotten all the way to the champion without losing a Pokemon, and it would be the dream to beat a Hardcore Nuzlocke with only bug types without losing any Pokemon. But to be able to achieve that dream, we have to go up against the strongest trainer in the Unova region, Champion Iris. And her squad is incredibly stacked, full of Dragon and Rock types, so it is gonna be very difficult. I start out with the Ant Bully, which might seem odd since it has to tank a Surf here, but I do this to be able to set up Stealth Rock specifically for the Focus Sash held by Haxorus. Expecting another Surf here, I swap into Bug's Life, but it goes for Focus Blast, which is also super effective, and we were at very low health, meaning that it must have seen the KO with pretty much any move. Regardless though, Bug's Life can tank it and go for a super effective Bug Gem boosted X-Scissor, taking out the Hydreigon. Druddigon coming in next is telegraphing that Fire Punch pretty clearly, so I go ahead and swap in Pacific Rim, who actually takes a whole lot of damage. I do, however, get the Flame Body proc, which is huge since it allows me to set up a Quiver Dance the next turn very safely. The Druddigon then goes for Outrage, and even with the burn, it does a lot of damage, and we survive it on 17 HP, as I can take out the Druddigon the next turn with a Psychic. Aggron is up next, and funny enough, it has Rockhead instead of Sturdy, which means that we're going to be able to roast this thing, taking it out in one hit with a flamethrower. Next is Archeops, and I really don't have anything I can swap into this thing, so I decided to just risk it with a flamethrower here, and unfortunately, a +1 flamethrower is not enough to take it out, which means that Pacific Rim dies, and with it, the dream. Oh well, I guess you can't have it all. Pacific Rim gave us so much this run, so I guess it's fitting that it's the first bit of really bad luck we had. Either way, Charlotte can come in and take out the full restored Archeops with a Thunderbolt, as Iris then sends in Lapras. Because of the Stealth Rocks, it's starting out at 75 HP, which means one Thunderbolt is enough, leaving only her ace Pokemon Haxorus. And I really cannot risk this thing going for Dragon Dance on a switch, so I have to go for a Bug Buzz, which does a surprising amount of damage, as an Outrage then clean takes out Charlotte. It is unfortunate that we have to double the death tally, getting us that much further away from the dream. However, at least we get to end this with the Pokemon that started it all, taking out the Haxorus with an X-Scissor, which means that we won a Pokemon Black 2 Challenge Mode Hardcore Nuzlocke using only bug types. Listen, I had a lot of fun with this one, and I was kind of thinking that maybe we'd get through it deathless at the end, but alas. Remember that if you have any challenges in mind that you would like to see me tackle, comment them down below because I might just do it. And until we see each other next time, rock on. Let me hear my fellow degenerates!